It is my pleasure this afternoon to introduce our panelists who, as Kamla mentioned, span the region. So that's always great to get the different perspectives. I will start with Najhdla Roserie-Dilusuk, who is the General Manager of PKF Corporate Services in St. Lucia. Good afternoon and welcome, Najhdla. Najhdla is a corporate governance professional who started off her career as a teacher, a secondary school teacher, teaching subjects such as English language, French, Spanish, typing, and social studies. She then was recruited by a law firm to serve as their compliance officer for its trust and corporate services business. And this sort of started her journey into the offshore financial services sector, in which she has been employed for the last 21 years. Being passionate about doing things right and the spirit of excellence, Najhdla was instinctively drawn to the sphere of governance. Her expertise has been predominantly built and leveraged within micro and small enterprises, providing specialist organizational, technical, legal, and business support to the formation and management of international business companies, mutual funds, captives, and trusts. Aside from her role as compliance officer, she's worked in the corporate services administrator role and currently fills the role of general manager at PKF Corporate Services in St. Lucia, one of 17 registered agents serving the international financial services sector in St. Lucia. Najhdla holds a first-class degree in law from the University of Wolverhampton, a certificate in captive insurance management from Glasgow Caledonian University, and a Master's of Arts in Applied and Professional Ethics from the University of Leeds. A wife and mum of 2 daughters, she's an ardent reader, fiber arts enthusiast, and a succulent gardener. So welcome, Najhdla. That's quite a diverse array of interests, so that's always great. We also have with us this afternoon Mr. Andrew Rowe, who is the Managing Director of RF&G Insurance Company Limited out of Belize. Andrew currently serves as the Managing Director at the corporate head office of FRG Insurance Company Limited in Belize City. In this role, he manages the overall operations of the company, which includes underwriting, claims, reinsurance, and finance. He also provides oversight for M&C General Insurance, a subsidiary of RF&G, which operates in St. Lucia and in St. Vincent. His corporate experience includes a total of 14 years in the insurance industry, with 13 of those being at RF&G. And the other year he spent as a reinsurance broker intern in London and Miami. Andrew also serves as a director on the board of RF&G Life Insurance, as well as several of our Rowe Group companies involved in real estate and agriculture. In his free time, he serves as the treasurer for the Belize Game Fish Association, and where he advocates for and works on educating sports fishermen on sustainable fishing practices. And in this role, he works closely and maintains strong relationships with NGOs such as Belize Coastal Zone Management and Oceana Belize, as well as government bodies, and particularly the Ministry of the Blue Economy. Andrew earned his Bachelor of Degrees in Finance from the University of Colorado in Denver, a Master of Science in Risk Management and Insurance from Florida State University, and is qualified by the Chartered Insurance Institute of the UK. And lastly, but by no means, least, is Dr. Charlene Sharpe, who's well known to us at CCGI. Good afternoon, Dr. Sharpe. Dr. Charlene Sharpe is a distinguished academic with a background in geography and environmental science and public administration. She earned her PhD in geography from Rutgers University, where she focused her research on food security, climate change, adaptation, hazards management, and community resilience in small island developing states. Additionally, Dr. Sharpe holds 2 Master of Science degrees from the University of the West Indies in Natural Resources Management and Government, further solidifying her experience in urban and rural integration, environmental development, international relations, and public administration. Her academic journey is marked by numerous accolades and fellowships, including the prestigious Fulbright Scholarship. In her professional career, Dr. Sharpe has held several influential positions, including the Associate Provost and Associate Vice President of Academics at Northern Caribbean University, And in these roles, she has, and sorry, and Associate Vice President of Academics at Northern Caribbean University. In these roles, she has demonstrated exceptional leadership in strategic planning, curriculum development, and institutional accreditation. Notably, Dr. Sharpe led the development and implementation of NCU's strategic plan for 2022 to 2027, redesigned the core curriculum, and has established a comprehensive academic advising model. Her efforts have significantly advanced the university's operational efficiency, academic quality, and student success rates, securing institutional accreditation and fostering an improved work climate. Beyond academia, Dr. Sharpe's governance experience is extensive. She has served on various boards, including the National Solid Waste Management Authority and the Jamaica Fire Brigade, where she has contributed to risk management and technical operations. Dr. Sharpe's expertise extends to consultancy roles within organizations such as the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Her contributions to governance and risk management underscores her commitment to improving institutional frameworks and community resilience, making her a pivotal figure. Sorry, I've given you an extra job, have I? A pivotal figure in both academic and public service sectors. She was elected to the board of the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute in May of 2024. Welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us and the audience who is listening in. Of course, this concept of generative AI is, it's well advanced, and there are many spaces where there are huge opportunities for it to play a great role. And of course, with governance and management, we always find straddling a line, the board is straddling a line where at times it steps over into the management role, and the management may sometimes take on the role of the board in its own discharge of duties. And so we're really happy to begin a conversation today to hear, as far as that goes, where do you each see the opportunities that generative AI may present to provide the sort of frameworks that could bolster and perhaps further distill those roles of the board and of management, so that we can, have enhanced operations and enhanced standards for companies operating in the region. And to start off the conversation, I will invite Najhdla to share her views with us over the next 8 to 10 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great start to the day. I think starting off with a bit of a dilemma. I wanted to look at this in terms of general AI and our region and just AI on the whole. So when I looked at it in terms of just AI on the whole, we see generally AI has been used as a tool for strategic growth and productivity enhancement. But if you really consider it, the truth is that it's just not a tool. It has brought a transformative paradigm to business. And so I think in that aspect of it, it really shifts and disrupts our traditional thoughts of what governance should look like. So traditionally, our boards would rely on management for information, and we see AI is quickly blurring that role because it's putting data and analytics at the fingertips of our directors. And if the directors are not careful, it's very easy to overstep their boundaries and actually get engaged in the management of the company. Now, the very fact that it's infusing the space with data, it also means that the boards can make faster and more informed decisions. So then that also means that AI has the capacity to cause the structure of our boards to evolve, where you're seeing skills and competencies along the lines of analysis becoming higher in demand on our boards. Now, if we go and we look at this further on an ethics point of view, it can cause fragmentation within our boards, because then you have persons who have more experience, who have more capacity in terms of analytics and in understanding AI. Those voices become louder in our boardrooms. And then they either tune out other voices, and then you have, like I said, a fractured board. Not only that, but in terms of management, it creates, like I said, a power shift, because then who takes on what role? If the board starts to infringe on the role of management, what role does the board then, the management then take? So I think in that area, we have a case where, as I see it, where we have AI doing a lot of co-governing, if you want to put it that way, the governance will shift to a place where the body is primarily focused with generating goodwill. Because when you look at it, in the age of AI, social impact and social dialogue is key. It's perception, what the public perceives of you, how they perceive you using your product, how your product is impacting the market. So the board then has to focus more on meaningful, exhibiting meaningful citizenship, social conscience, and becoming more values driven and outcome. Your governance has to be more outcome oriented, outcome focused. Oversight will shift more to oversight of AI, in the sense that the business now has to determine, the board has to determine at what level are we going to interact with AI? I mean, we're in the age of AI and everybody wants to jump on the AI bandwagon, but are you getting on board because it's going to make you more effective, or is going to bring out more substance, or are you just doing it for doing sake? So then you have to look at aligning the business architecture with the ethical considerations of AI. So your KPIs, your performance incentives, your metrics, your management incentives, your recruitment, everything has to dovetail with your ethics of the AI strategy that you're going to implement. Otherwise, you get back to the point of fragmentation. And then you have to get more input from your stakeholders, whether that be your regulators, your customers, your employees, on the deployment of your AI strategy. Because again, like I said, perception and again, social impact and dialogue will dictate how successful your business is and how you communicate that. In terms of management, I see management in that space moving more into countering the effects of job displacement. So encouraging your team to become more innovative, upskilling and reskilling your employees. I would even say going as far as in reskilling your board as well, deploying your retrained employees across the board to more knowledge-based work, fostering data literacy, because your staff are going to need to know how to interact with AI. So pushing and teaching innovation and technology safety skills, and also democratizing AI. So you want to have a devil's advocate, you want to foster an open culture where people can push back and say, this is what the impact this is having. You intended X, but Y is happening. And you should have an open culture, and also to be able to effect changes in real time. Management, I think, also will become more focused on modeling values-driven decision-making. So we know the risks inherent with AI, the algorithm risks, the biases, and what have you. So we need to, while AI is taking on more of the skills that we humans would carry out, we need to bolster those skills that it would take away, if you so to speak. So empathy building skills, and the like. So building up what AI would normally not, enhancing our humanness, put it that way. in terms of looking at AI from the Caribbean perspective, when I did a survey of the environment, we have an absence of a legislative framework. We have lack of data sovereignty. So all our infrastructure for AI is owned by foreigners. The lack of data sovereignty means that any adoption of AI systems within the Caribbean will leave us open, subject to the legal and surveillance frameworks of either the USA or Europe. And we also have a problem of data protection legislation where few islands have data protection legislation in place. That again, coupled with the fact that we have no data sovereignty, means as a region, we cannot coordinate cross-border responses to security threats. We have limited or no digital infrastructure, so the data centers, the high-performance computing infrastructure, servers, all the lack of those resources mean that we rely heavily again on external providers, and the reliance on those persons make us vulnerable to service disruption, and again, it undermines our data sovereignty. The good thing is that our location makes us, we have an enduring connectivity to global markets. But the fact that we have been so behind in uptake of AI adoption, that limits our competitiveness on the markets. Now, when we look at this against the fact that we are small islands, most of us in the Caribbean are small islands, and our geography means we have limited economic drivers. So that in itself pushes us towards digitalization as a form of diversification of our economies. But again, the high latency in AI means that we are still behind. We are not able to be competitive. And the fact that our populations are small and aging, and the fact that most of our young persons, we have a brain drain in the region, it means that whatever AI infrastructure or deployment we are thinking of for our businesses, it has to include tailored solutions. It has to embrace human and ethnic-centered values. So that means that whatever AI we're thinking of deploying within our businesses has to be of the kind that will just not replicate what is already being done, but take into consideration the characteristics or the framework that we already have in the Caribbean. So when I look at it from the Caribbean perspective, then we see a circularity or an interconnectivity in the existing factors. And those characteristics, I think, should shape how now we drive our management and our board roles, our governance roles. And generally, I identified two factors we should be looking at. One, clarity, and the second, alignment. So in that sense, I would see AI further blurring the roles of between governance and management. In terms of clarity, we want to examine clarity of purpose. Again, I mentioned earlier, whether deploying the AI tools is simply necessary because the business is operating in an AI era, or whether it just wants to keep up with AI talking points, or whether it is there to improve output and substance. So in terms of traditional governance rules, the value of clarity, you can compare it to strategic oversight, planning, and decision-making, which is the main domain of the board. However, in terms of management perspective, if we want to compare it with traditional roles, we would apply it as a virtue in the terms of being able to communicate clearly and honestly with stakeholders and employees, how to behave in particular situations, how to model values-based decision-making, and the like. In terms of alignment of the values of the board acts as the heart, mind, and conscience of the company. And So there should be alignment between the board, the management team, the individual values of the organization's employees, as well as the AI systems that are deployed within the business and the customer base, so that actions, decisions, and goals are consistent with the core beliefs and principles across the board. So you want to achieve a sense of harmony on purpose. Again, it goes back to the point of fragmentation. If every system, if your tool, if your employees, if the board itself, if you have different values, you are not going to be able to achieve purpose. And when we look at it, AI in itself is not ethical or unethical, but how it is used by the company will determine how it is perceived. So because organizations have their own ethical frameworks, and so do the employees, so do the customers, you don't want to have a case where there is a lack of shared values and goals and conflicting interests, because all of these will impact the business's engagement and its ability to operate successfully in the course of business. And that is all the more so poignant when you consider the risks of AI. When you deploy AI, the ethical risk, the workforce technology risk, the legal risk, and which is a big thing in our region. And also from the standpoint of mutatis mutandis logic, if you look at it, what we put into the AI systems is what we will get back out. So our whole design, when we look at governance, it is about putting in the kind of values we want it to send back out to us, because this is what's going to ultimately shape our organizations. And I mentioned before, the alignment in terms of the business infrastructure, the alignment of policies, alignment of standards, and alignment of frameworks. And again, with the Caribbean, we have to look at it not just at industry levels, but also at national levels, and then again at a regional level, and bringing all of this together to form a coherent framework. So basically, these are my thoughts so far.
Okay, yes, thank you for that. Thank you so much for that, Najila. Excellent points. I think the sort of values proposition around, the integrity of what goes into AI and how we can harness that is one of the key issues, certainly, that occupies my mind anyway. It is not error-free, as we would understand, and it really is built on what we put in. So very interesting views and a lot of diverse perspectives there. I'd like to turn it to Andrew now to find out what his perspectives are. I know he's coming from the insurance side of the world, and we'd love to hear your perspectives on this topic.
Yes, so as Kimberly introduced, I am the managing director of RF&G Insurance. The insurance industry, as I'll try and keep it more broad, but just touching on the insurance industry, this industry is ripe for disruption as a result of artificial intelligence. The reasons being are that it's a very old industry. Insurance has been around for over 400 years. And quite honestly, very little has changed in 400 years. There's still a lot of manual processing that takes place. Some insurance companies are better than others at how they do it. But we also gather tremendous amounts of data. And at this point, I would say, especially in the Caribbean, of course, the first world is a lot different, but in the Caribbean, we're not so great at leveraging that data. And so as these tools get onboarded, companies that are not able to do the things that Najhdla was saying, like upskilling their employees and those sorts of things, and integrating technology, democratizing artificial intelligence, they're going to struggle to be competitive against those companies that do. So that's just kind of the only part I'll touch on insurance. In general, we're here to talk about governance versus management of this transition. My role as the managing director here at RF&G is I have to serve as the bridge between the board of directors who set the governing frameworks and the management team who execute it. as well as being the conduit who then takes information back up to the board and helps guide the decision making. So I get to see this concept from both sides. I'm going to touch on 4 topics in my 10 minutes or so. Those topics are going to be accountability in AI-enhanced decision-making. That's both from the point of view of the boards and management. Regulatory considerations as we onboard artificial intelligence, and I might touch a bit on insurance as very regulated industry in comparison to many others. Thirdly, we'll talk about data usage and security. And lastly, the talent management. So starting with the accountability, I guess I'll start with a question of how can you make sure that your team owns the decisions that they're making and owns what they say or write, type, whatever it might be, in the age of artificial intelligence? Because that, I think, is one of the biggest risks that we face of people becoming tremendously reliant on AI systems and not quite understanding what it is that they're pumping out. And that goes from the top, right from the board. Najhdla had a very good, I really liked what you said about the fragmentation of the board, which is something I see. I have some board members who are very good at adopting AI. They're using it. And you can see that their ability to understand and interpret data that's put forward to them from management is vastly improved over where they were previously. And then, of course, way ahead of those who are not using those tools. So that's at the board level. At the employee level, same thing. That's a lot more basic. They maybe put together an email, they put together a memo that goes out, and it's very easy to see and detect where AI has been used. If you know the person, you'll know that that perhaps isn't their style of speaking or writing. You know that the thoughts that they put forward are perhaps not coherently thought through. And so that reliance can be quite dangerous. The flip side is it's a tremendous resource, and one that we certainly do need to make sure that that team members are understanding and learning how to use. Because again, using insurance as an example, for those companies that decide that they're going to be anti-AI or we're going to be too scared to start to deploy it, they will very, very quickly get left behind. So from my perspective, for both boards and management, it's imperative that they first start by educating their team members on what AI is and what it's intended to do. And then secondly, how you would like to see those AI tools deployed within the workplace. Sanctioning certain AI tools, because I'm the father of 2 young kids. Just like with sex and alcohol, they're gonna use it. So you better start educating them from a young age on how to use it and what's going to happen. People are going to use AI tools. And in your business, again, Najhdla said, these are our values are judged by the consumers and the stakeholders that use our products and work with our businesses. So we want to make sure that we sanction the tools that our team members are going to be using. Make sure that you have a decision and decide which tools are we going to use and how do we intend to use them, and then make sure that they're appropriately licensed as well. This kind of gets into a little bit later on the data usage and security, because just having random applications sitting on your computers or on your company devices can expose you to security threats, as well as produce information that isn't quite what you want to be putting out there. So understanding what tools there are, licensing them, so paying for them. This I don't think anybody should expect that this should all be free, given the hundreds of billions of dollars that these big companies are shelling out to develop these tools. We will have to pay for them. So making sure you understand them, license them, educate your people. Those are some of the key things when it comes to holding people accountable for AI decision making. Moving on to the regulatory side. So as I said, insurance is a very, very regulated industry. We the regulation when it comes to AI, and I heard Eldon was speaking about this earlier in his presentation. The regulation, I suspect, will take some time to catch up to what the tools are able to do. There's going to be a lot of argument and fighting, as we've already seen amongst the big nations. Some think that this should be governed holistically. Others think they should be able to make decisions up for themselves on how it's going to be used. So it's going to be hard to wait until regulation comes around before we decide how we want to do it. So it's important that, again, we're understanding what these tools can do and how we're going to be deploying them into our businesses. And that might just have to be done with a common sense approach. If you can't wait for other people to figure it out, you might have to do a little bit of figuring it out, either as an individual entity or as an industry. And then lastly, when the opportunities present themselves to design and create regulatory frameworks, it's key that people get involved. Last week, I had the pleasure of spending 2 days with our own regulator on a solvency regulation. And it was intense. You know, there was a lot of documentation that we had to read. But I was surprised at the level of involvement that my peer companies gave to this process. This is highly important. Solvency for an insurance company is very important. It's going to dictate how you invest your money, how much you have to keep within your assets, the diversity of the asset base. It goes on and on. But so few people take the time to try to understand what it is that regulators are putting forward, and then getting involved in the process and making sure that it's fit for purpose. Because so many times you will have regulatory bodies, legislators, politicians saying something that they think might be right, but they're not the end users of the regulation they put out. They're just the enforcers. And so for us on the receiving end of it, it's vital that we play a role in designing and pushing these regulatory frameworks forward. And the more of us that can do it together, the better off we're going to be, because that will create diversity and it will open doors for us to work along with one another. Moving on to data usage and security. I think this probably, from what I have seen at the governance level, especially with dealing with older members of my board, they really struggle around the security of the data and how it's going to be used. There seems to be a very large fear, which results in hesitation to deploy AI tools because of this perception that my data is going to be taken, it's going to be used in some way, whether that be malicious or whether it be against me, whatever the case might be. That seems to be one of the biggest fears at the board level. Moving into management and the employee level, quite honestly, there's little to no consideration of that. They're happy to upload anything they have into an AI tool, record any meeting that they sit in with any AI tool that they find on the internet that might be helpful for them, and then use that information. So you've got two very big ends of the spectrum of people who are very hesitant because of fear, and then people who just don't understand the consequences. And both of those are bad things. So from the governance point of view, there has to be frameworks to put in place. There has to be policies that guide the business and management on how they're going to deploy these tools. And it has to take place. You know, as I said, with the conversations with your children, it's going to happen. So it's important that you put the structure in place to make sure that it's done right. One other thing that I think, when we get down more deeply into data, what I have seen from the use of artificial intelligence tools is that data analysis is really moving away from a technical function that might be able or might only be available to those people who understand technical analysis, financial analysis, to a computer function, which anybody who maybe knows what they're looking for can begin to use. I'll give you a real quick example. My wife is in the tourism business, and she's been looking at acquisition of another hotel. Now, previously, 5 years ago, if she needed some financial analysis done, it got sent to me, And I sat there burning the midnight oil, trying to run some figures for her so she could then make some decisions, or it would be passed to an accountant who would do the same thing. She's an early adopter of artificial intelligence, and she plugged those figures into ChatGPT. I gave her some guidelines of what you should be looking for as far as analyzing this thing. Before, in the fastest of time, this system pumped out the analysis that was needed accurately. And so what it meant is we took away probably hours of work that needed to be done to analyze these financials, 20 minutes of prompting, and we got our answers. Now, she is now able to review that information, make decisions on it, and move forward to what she's good at, which is running tourism operations. That example can be replicated over and over again in so many different ways. And so what I'm saying is that this whole technical analysis function can be given to the computers, and so people can then use information to make better decisions. So then that moves into the second part of what I want to say about data usage specifically, is that from a governance point of view, there's been a traditional restriction, I guess, on data and information. And it was channeled into the people who had the ability to interpret it, understand it, and then produce structured results out of that data. Now, if it's the computer systems that are able to do that, we need to begin to understand who in our organization is using this information for decision-making, and how do we make sure that they have the access to analyze this information in a much quicker and probably more accurate way, so that they can move on to making the decisions they need. Because you can't end up in a situation where you're bottlenecking everything and continuing to withhold information that's then going to hamstring the people who are trying to carry on your operations. Moving into the security side of it, it's, I think we're all very keenly aware of the challenges just with technology security. We've probably all been, if not victims of, somebody has tried to bamboozle us with sending us malicious links, phishing software. We've probably all had to sit through many hours of training on how do we avoid these things. And that's, just the very bare minimum of where we're headed with artificial intelligence. AI will hugely enhance the ability of malicious actors to take advantage of people, of businesses, access their data. And it goes now beyond just somebody getting in and holding your systems ransom. The threats that people using AI can create to your business are enormous. And so that's the external side. The internal side is the same. Information being leaked out, being used for the wrong purposes, disclosed when it shouldn't be. A very long list is what we can create. But the point I'm trying to make, and again, this has to start at the governance level, is making sure that security of our data and security of technological systems becomes a core competency in any organization that gathers data, which in today's day and age is almost everybody. Some people to bigger degrees than others. But without making sure that we're honing in on security and ensuring that our data is properly used, we open ourselves up to tremendous risks and tremendous threats. From the point of view of insurance, there is cyber insurance that helps protect you from these things, but you will never get cyber insurance unless you have the appropriate protocols and security in place. Finally, to talent management. This is also one that Najhdla talked about a little bit, and I agreed with a lot of the things she said. Upskilling people and those sorts of things are going to be vital as we move forward. So I won't touch on those, but a little bit more broadly, I guess, on who artificial intelligence might affect, or which companies, industries might be affected. So if you think about your own industry and the ability for artificial intelligence to replace people, in some cases, there may be somewhere it's very little. It's very much people-to-people interaction, might be heavy physical involvement, those things serving people, like the hotel, the tourism industry, there's not much that can be disrupted there. On the insurance side, there's a tremendous amount that could be disrupted. And so for me, as I sit here and work with these tools and begin to deploy them into the business, my focus here is how can I take those people who have many years of insurance experience, which isn't readily available in the market, at least not here. In some other countries, it might be. How do I take them and how do I get them to do other more value creation work? In many cases, they're spending time just data entry, those sorts of things. How do I get them to do the things that computers cannot, which include being empathetic towards customers, especially when they have a claim and they're maybe in a difficult situation. Creativity. Computers can be creative, but only really with our own prompting. How can we be creative about what we're doing and the products we're offering? And lastly, that face-to-face interaction, where in an insurance business, we're all about trust. Nobody buys insurance from an insurance company they don't trust. So how do I pivot my people to do different things that create more value for the business? Some businesses may see tremendous enhancement from deploying artificial intelligence. They may be able to grow their business exponentially because they now have the tools that are able to do it and won't have to onboard more people. So there's so much opportunity. This is one of the things I think that frustrates me a little bit about AI and what you hear on the media and that sort of thing of so many jobs are gonna be lost. We're gonna see huge recessions because people aren't working anymore. I simply don't believe that. Not just my own personal belief based on history. In the 1800s, we were, I think 80% of the population, at least in developed world, was farming. That now is down to very little. It's not like the world stopped. The world grew a great deal. And look where we are today. I think AI will have the same impact, but the data shows it as well. You look at all of the predictions and it says, yes, a lot of jobs will be lost because of artificial intelligence. But there is the expectation that there's a net gain. There's more created than are actually lost. And I guess as a final point, as an example, just to hit that nail on its head, I'm going to talk about nails, not the nails as, manicure, pedicure, but steel nails that are used for construction and building things. So in 1810, which is a long time ago now, nails consisted of 0.4% of US GDP, almost 0.5% of US GDP. Really because there was not much else happening. There was very limited industry. We didn't have technology, or the technology back then was extremely limited. And so something as simple as a nail took up 0.5% of the GDP. Today, I tried to calculate it and I can't because the calculator gives me one of those numbers that is too long. It's not even a calculable percentage of GDP, but to give a comparison, 0.4 of US GDP would be equivalent to what Americans spend on laptops and personal computers, or equivalent to what they spend on travel. And so nails have become a tiny proportion of the whole overall, and other things have replaced it. I doubt in 1810 anybody was flying to Jamaica, St. Lucia, Barbados, anywhere to go on holiday. They'd have to get on a ship and take them months to get there. Things have changed, and AI will do the same thing. It will drastically alter the way we live, the way we work. And the key to success here through this next generation transition is going to be, how do we govern our businesses to make sure that they're prepared to manage it? And then how do we see through the management process and the human, especially the human alteration that needs to take place to support these businesses as they go forward. So thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you for those perspectives, Andrew. Really interesting. I mean, while regulations are lagging, it doesn't mean companies can't set some frameworks up for its own usage. finding the balance between those who fear the advances in data and information against those who probably go too far with their usage, to create risk for the companies. How do we create more balance so that we can have a functional sort of operation of AI in our companies, leveraging that data to create that efficiency and better decision making, but not at the expense of the human talent. How do we repurpose our humans even so that they have more meaningful work, as you say. In our sector, we also view the data entry sort of jobs as not really unlocking the true potential in the talent that you hire. So thank you so much for those views. I'll take it over now to Dr. Sharpe to join us in a discussion and to add her perspectives to all that has been said and some new ones as well. So over to you, Dr. Sharpe.
Thank you so very much, and good afternoon to everybody. It is 12:53 here in the beautiful island of Jamaica. It's a sunny day in Jamaica. It is indeed a pleasure to be with you, and I've listened intensely to what Andrew and Najhdla is saying, and I had to be nodding because it resonates so deeply with what it is that I'm thinking. When we were given this topic, Kamla, I wondered to myself, what is this big hubbub, this big concern that persons have regarding the dangers of AI? Because I love using my AI tools, and I'm just going as a happy little kid, skipping around using the AI until I started listening. And just in this week alone, I found an article in The Guardian about 12 years ago, speaking about the Handy model that was developed by NASA. And in that particular model, they were using historical records, looking at how advanced, complex, sophisticated, creative, innovative civilizations, how they became fragile over time and impermanent, in a sense, how they imploded after a while, how it is that large, well-to-do, artificial even civilizations would have collapsed, therefore raising questions about sustainability of our modern civilization. And if that was not enough, at Princeton University, not so long ago, it was sometime in May, there was a conference by the Institute of Advanced Studies. And at that institute on May 2, Sir Dennis Hassabis, and persons probably would have known him from Google because he's the person who created that DeepMind game at Google. He was speaking about the developments in our societies in this modern world, how it is that artificial intelligence or anything that we would have seen over the last probably 100 or so years would have been transforming our capacities to discover and reshape and to some extent understand knowledge and humanity, and how all of these discoveries and new forms of being, new forms of things that societies would have innovated, how these to some extent are creating a new type of human being. And they would have listed AI as being one of those discoveries that would have the potential to create a new type of man, a new type of civilization. As a matter of fact, one of the founding fathers at Princeton's computing lab, he would have stated that what he was seeing is tantamount to what he experienced in the development of the atomic bomb, the development of the hydrogen bomb. And he thought that what he's foreseeing can be disastrous if people are unable to keep pace with what was being created. And he didn't think that humanity was keeping pace with the technology. And I thought that it could not get any worse until I sat and listened to the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton. And he stated that in 2023, he actually left Google because he wanted to warn people about this rising danger of AI. And he thought that AI had, at least some 20% chance of leading to human extinction. And he was feeling some deep regret for helping to create AI. And I figure for the first time, I really sat. It was a moment for pause, to just step back personally, to look at how I was managing, how I was using the AI, and therefore what my role could be as a board member or even in a managerial position in this AI generation. What could our roles be? Do we have distinct roles to play? And of course, he mentioned, the Hinton, that is the godfather of AI, he mentioned the two types of risks. And we all tend to focus on how people could misuse AI, which is a real risk. But for him, it was the existential risk that was so prominent. The fact that we have never had to deal with anything that was smarter than us as human beings. And he therefore had no ideas to how we could actually deal with this potential threat to humanity. And that is how he was putting across his thoughts on how seriously we ought to be looking at this AI generation, at what is happening in our world today. And so I listened keenly to what Andrew and Najhdla had to say. And they are so right, because if we're thinking through the resource and the capacity constraints that we have here in the Caribbean, and it's not just in the Caribbean, because when we're thinking about the regulatory infrastructure outside of Europe, we're not really seeing much of the regulatory infrastructure. And with that which is in Europe, they're not regulating AI as it pertains to the military. So they have free rein. I mean, we regulate the food we eat, we regulate what people can do, but when it comes on to AI, there is that reticence there. I heard Andrew on the technical expertise shortage, and we can see that in our region. I've heard them on the data representation challenges, and yes, we do have especially limited local data. We have a lot of data, but are they accurate? We're talking about the economic dependency risk. We're speaking about the governance coordination challenges. There's so many things that we do not have in place. And therefore, it is begging the question then, is there a role for the board versus the management when it comes to how we are dealing with AI? And I sat and I thought it through for a while, and I actually drew it by hand. Yes, I'm back dating myself, back to pen and paper, and drew by hand a bicycle. If you could put that model on, please. And then I went through and I thought of how this model could be used to differentiate the role of the board and the management with AI. And I did a detailed thing, then I placed it in the AI, quite a number of them, and asked them to produce this for me. This was the best representation that I got. Not what I truly asked for, but it was the best one that I got. And based on what it is that I was thinking through then, AI, using this bicycle analogy, forgive me, I'm in school, would suggest that governance must be the front wheel. And each time I asked the AI to put governance as the front wheel, it placed it at the back. So I don't know what AI knows that I don't know, unless that is the front wheel. But governance must be that front wheel, because the front wheel of a bicycle determines the direction that that bicycle will travel in, or the bike will travel in. So in the context of AI, governance sets the overall direction. It must set the strategy, and the policies. And this includes defining the organization's AI vision, establishing ethical guidelines, ensuring compliance with laws and regulations, and managing all the risks that Najhdla and Andrew would have spoken about. It seems to me then that AI must be asking that governance really should be answering, or governance should be asking the questions of where should we go? What is going to be too much? What principles and boundaries should therefore guide our use of AI? That should be what governance in the Caribbean should be looking at. Governance is asking all these should questions. Should we use AI in this way? Governance should be setting those boundaries and accountabilities for AI deployment and use. So the board's role includes understanding AI's impact on the business, AI's impact on the workforce, AI's impact on the various stakeholders, and therefore maintaining fiduciary responsibility over AI initiatives. And if the front wheel is governance, then the back wheel must be management. So that back wheel provides the power, it provides the drive to push the bike forward. In AI, management therefore must be responsible for executing the strategies and the policies set by governance. And this involves implementing all the AI systems, the day-to-day operations, etc. Management is therefore answering, how do we get there? How do we turn these strategies and these policies that the governance would have asked for into practical action? So management is asking, therefore, and answering the whole questions. How do we implement? It means then that just as how the bicycle would need both wheels to function, effective AI initiatives require both strong governance, that's the direction, and capable management, that's the execution. If either wheel is missing, and if there's any misalignment, progress will be stalled. We'll have instability within the system. The bicycle analogy that I'm proposing here makes it clear that governance and management are distinct but complementary. Governance cannot pedal the organization forward without management, and management cannot steer without governance direction. And where adaptability is concerned, in this fast evolving AI landscape, the front wheel, that's governance, may need to adjust direction quickly in response to new risks or new opportunities, while the back wheel management must be agile enough to follow and to maintain momentum. I'm thinking that using all that we know about governance, all that we know about management in the traditional sense, that it will apply. But from a strategic governance imperative perspective, the path forward really requires Caribbean states to balance building sufficient AI governance capacity without duplicating efforts across the region. It requires ensuring AI development serves local populations rather than extracting value, and maintaining democratic oversight while fostering innovation. Just given the demands that we're going to be seeing now in the region, unprecedented, I can imagine, cooperation in AI governance and management is needed and must move beyond the traditional sovereignty concerns as we look towards shared regulatory frameworks that individual states can lock into, as we cannot do it alone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharpe, for those perspectives. Very, as much as AI feels futuristic, very much more futuristic about, how we should be considering these issues. I want to invite the co-panelists now to sort of, before we take other questions, to sort of invite any comments you may have based on what you've heard from your co-panelists, comments or questions. before we open it up.
I guess I wanted to say to Dr. Sharpe, I thought the point about a common regulatory framework throughout the region was a very good one. We're going to be dealing with the same technology. It'll be applied very similarly across the country, the various countries in the Caribbean. The hard part, I guess, and this is from my cynical side, is how do we get that to happen? Because while, you know, even in the institutions like the single trade agreements that we have, it's just been so challenging. Everybody kind of wants to be the director of their own domain. So how do we get past that old-fashioned and outdated mentality to get to a much more, to work together more closely to achieve something that could be very beneficial to all of us?
That's indeed an excellent question. You know, just thinking through from an international relations perspective, we're recognizing more and more that we do have international standards, adaptations, and Caribbean states really must try to, I don't know if we're trying to adapt to these global governance framework, whether it's the US's approach or the EU's approach, without having any significant input into the development of these frameworks. Yet still, when we do get an opportunity now to create our own framework, we have to deal with issues of sovereignty, because how we view things from our end here up north, it's not necessarily, when I'm saying, I mean, in the Northern Caribbean, it's not how things are viewed in the Eastern Caribbean. It's not how things are viewed in the Southern Caribbean. How do we get past our own national needs? We've been having that challenge from time immemorial. CARICOM still is trying to work. And here is another challenge that would have been added to it. And in that session that I mentioned that was held at Princeton, the founding father at Princeton of their program called it a monster. What it is that he saw coming, he considered it a monster that if we're not very careful, it is going to overtake us. And as a region, we still have not got to that point of being able to just sit together to iron out simple, well, it's not simple, to iron out these complex things, and it's complex. We need multi-stakeholder coordination if we're going to do it. But who is going to lead on this?
If I may, Kimberly.
Yeah, sure. Kamla?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a really nice contribution in the chat from Edward Millington. Edward is from Barbados, and he suggested that there needs to be a private academia partnership to clearly look at the impact of AI on Caribbean societies and how we can grow digital economies. So basically, he's saying the need for a regional Caribbean AI Center of Excellence is what we need to look at in terms of development and deployment of the use of AI. And I wanted to really commend Edward's contribution that he didn't say government must do it, because we have recognized that you cannot wait for government to be able to make these movements. So therefore, this look at private and academia partnerships. I think it's an excellent suggestion, so that what you will find is the private sector and persons who understand the kind of impact that's coming our way can begin that very informal dialogue to share information and to build that common understanding and framework.
One of the things Edward said there too is impacts on digital economy. And it made me think of Najdla's point about brain drain that we all suffer, and everybody's in all of our own countries. I'm actually seeing that it has the potential to reduce brain drain, because now people don't have to go and work in the US. They don't have to go to Europe physically to be there. They can actually work here. And I say that because I have recently lost 2 employees to businesses that are, one is a European one is an American one. Those employees have left my company to work for these foreign companies, but they're doing it right here in Belize from their homes. They're earning US dollars in one case, euros in another, and that money then gets put into this economy. So they don't actually leave. And perhaps it's a temporary period of time where this is what they want in their life, but the changes they make to their life are not permanent changes. So building our own digital economies, whether it be labor or whether it be actual production of digital production, can certainly reduce that brain drain that we've been suffering from ever since.
I wanted to get Charlene's thoughts on some of the comments she made. So basically, you said you're looking at the governance and management following its traditional roles, its traditional iteration in the AI age. But I'm presuming that would be if we're looking at governance of AI. But would you hold to the same thoughts if we're looking at it from this perspective of governance by AI and governance with AI? Because this is what we're increasingly moving into in our business spaces. We actually have most of our decisions stemming out of AI systems. And in this case, can you truly see if the board is using predominantly insights generated by AI? Is it the board that is truly providing AI, or is it AI oversight? And what do you have? Is that artificial governance? Where do we go in that space? And does governance and management remain the same? Because at this point, the artificial intelligence system becomes sort of a co-director, a co-manager in the business. And then we go into accountability. You have accountability gaps. Who is responsible for the way the system thinks and for the decisions it produces? I just wanted to dig into that a bit more, Charlie.
That's a whole lot to dig into, but indeed, I'm hearing what it is that you're asking, but I'm thinking that if it is that we're understanding the role of the board in the traditional sense, then it is that the board will provide oversight. It is that the board will provide strategic direction. Is it that the board is providing ethical guidance? And if that is the case, then the board is providing risk and ethics governance. Therefore, it's the board's responsibility to help to establish the ethical framework for AI use. So it is not that it is not that the AI itself is it what do we say, government of the people, for the people, and by the people? So is it AI of the people, for the people, and by the people? Is it that it is AI that is doing all the decision making? Because the board will also have to be getting reports, transparent, honest reporting from management on how AI decisions are therefore being made. So we're not saying that you can't use AI to help with that, but somebody needs to be collecting honest, transparent report and to be having these audit trails. Because at times what you're putting out there, the data you're putting out there, you're not even sure what is happening with that data you're putting into AI and how it at some point it will come back to haunt you. But who is ensuring that the framework is in place to manage all of this, the strategic oversight that the board needs to give, that is indeed happening?
And if I may add to that, Charlene, if we look at this in the context of what was shared by Eldon this morning, as to how fundamental the disruption is that is being caused by the AI, the governance would only continue to work that way if our directors know and understand what AI is and the implications it's having. And I think both Najhdla and in fact, Andrew said he saw examples of what Najhdla was sharing, which is that the boards can sometimes, and I would say unwittingly, because they now have access to data that they traditionally will not have, can easily overstep. You can see the blurring of the lines. You can see challenges happening because directors don't quite understand how much AI is disrupting the way business is being done, and therefore, how do they ensure that they maintain their right position of oversight? And in understanding that strategic direction, a lot of the reports will be AI generated. Andrew gave us an excellent example of how his wife was able to use data and have an AI prepare the analysis for her. A lot of that is the future well, not the future, it's happening, right? But it is the future of our organizations. That's where it's all going to go. How do we ensure that our directors are prepared for this?
Yeah, just to add to Kamla, you know, that has sort of resonated with me. You know, the skills matrices that we have for our board members today, in many industries, we will see that a change. We will see an evolution, if you will. The skills that were needed, you know, 20 years ago, we have seen certainly the digital native or the digital, you know, expert, you know, occupying more of a space on those boards. And certainly we would need our board members to be Okuran up to speed with the elements that are required for the said frameworks that we are talking about, the said risk, you know, appetites around the use of AI and the balance to be created between the use of AI and the human workforce, if you will. And so I think it definitely starts there, where you need to have that awareness and knowledge base to sort of build it out, you know, in a way that makes sense for the companies, bearing in mind the pace of change in the world we live in today is, you know, it's difficult to keep up with, right? And by the time you've made one set of changes, it's time to switch gears again. So, you know, it's, you know, I'm seeing in the chat, it is similar to, you know, cyber risk. And, you know, there was a need to quickly get up to speed with, you know, what the cyber risk really meant for companies and the response to same and the frameworks around that. And I you know, that's the one thing that sort of resonates with me. You know, you don't know what you don't know, in a sense, and you need to build that skill set out at the board level to guide the company properly, so that it can still be that check and balance for the same you know, management body that is bringing this data to you, so that you can properly interrogate, you know, how has this been created, and what are the parameters around it, and who is accountable, and how do we keep people accountable for decisions that corporations are making.
And I love that that you ended with, Kimberly, in terms of, in the context of all of that, who is going to be accountable and how do we keep people accountable? And I think that leads to one of the points that Andrew made as well, which is boards need to understand how important it is to invest in the appropriate licenses. So they have to be prepared to spend in order that they can have the right tools and to be able to manage those tools in the right way. Because several times this panel spoke about data sovereignty. So managing that entity, you are looking at, there has to be a certain amount of spend, because yes, there would be free versions available. But
and I know too, the big.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, on the spending side, that's always a big board discussion, right? Getting budget for something. And often the first question is, how much are we gonna save? How much more money are we gonna earn? These sorts of questions. It's a bit unknown at this point, because we're just figuring this out. And you may not actually save immediately on, say, staffing costs. Some companies would be happy to just shave people right out of their business. I know that's not the way that the company I work for operates. They're going to figure out, how can we retool these people? And in the long run, certainly we're going to save money because we'll grow the business and we're not going to have to hire more people and onboard more costs. But that's not how all boards see it. And again, that's just another pitfall, a potential pitfall that's out there for companies that decide that they don't want to spend the money on something that they don't see the benefit in, but the benefits will come and those who aren't using it will take advantage of it.
But can liability be assigned when AI makes harmful decisions? You know, who is accountable when AI goes wrong?
In ethics, it always comes down to an individual. You cannot abdicate responsibilities to a machine. It has to be an individual. So then part of the board process would be defining who is accountable, who takes responsibility for what. And then again, it goes back to our values, because the values determine what goes into the AI in the first place and what it produces. If good goes in, it's highly likely that good will come out. But what you put in is what you're going to get out of it.
Unless, of course, the AI is, as they're saying, becoming smarter than humans. So as much as they're inputting, what they're seeing happening now is not necessarily what you put in, you get out. Is it that the AI is thinking on its own these days? Because that's a part of the challenge that they're having, why they're saying, let's go slow. Let's pause this for at least 6 months to see exactly what it is that we're dealing with. Because a number of the things that we take for granted in the human world, it is not translating in the machine world. I think there was a term we learned yesterday, Kamala. Was it human on loop, human in the loop, or human on the loop?
Oh, the truth, Charlene, is that there is going to be no pause.
That's a Pandora's box, and you can't put anything back in. It's out.
Put the genie back in the bottle.
Not at all. Not at all.
I think what this kind of puts an exclamation mark on is the need for the board to be engaged, because Kimberly, as a corporate attorney, I guess you can tell us that boards are ultimately responsible for what happens down at the company level, right? And so if they're not engaged and understanding and being proactive, they open themselves to a whole other risk of things going wrong and them being the ultimate responsible people. On that note, I will say again, from the insurance side of my brain, there is directors and officers insurance that you should probably be taking out to make sure that there's some level of financial protection should these things go awry. And it doesn't, you at least have some kind of insurance there to take care of the costs that are brought upon the business by some AI misstep.
Andrew, I think we may need to invite you to come and do a presentation on liability insurance for directors and officers as well. Yes, because the environment is changing so much. Yes, go ahead, Kimberly.
Yeah, just to note too that, I mean, we're talking about it from sort of a, it could be viewed as a big bang approach, the way you implement AI into your strategy. But I think it's not wrong to suggest that companies are all different sizes and with different objectives. And for sure, the sort of way up of, the size of the step you take into AI, it needs to be a manageable bite, manageable from your risk perspective. I mean, there are some industries that are regulated. There are others that are not. But no company wants to go through a sort of an incident or something that can overtake, its good reputation and all of the success it's built. So I do think even from that perspective, boards have to consider, the size of that step into AI. It can be gradual, it can be small. There are other industries that perhaps can't afford to wait, if you will, need to make that investment in order to remain competitive and relevant, both, to itself in terms of performance and to its clients. But I think it's a valid question. It's not about everybody has to jump over into this space. In fact, the reliance or the reliability rather of AI, as we have kind of touched on, is one of the key things that many companies have to think about, because if it becomes something of the nature of the AI itself was unreliable, that sort of becomes your issue, your reputational issue, your loss, your it rests on you. So I do think that's one of the big decisions. It's not about boards have to do this today in order to keep up, but it's sort of how do we step into this space, and maybe we start with a small piece before we we go full on. And I think all of those are relevant questions that boards have to be asking themselves, because there is definitely a key argument for efficiencies, around the cost space that I think many entities can examine, and it does not immediately translate to losing jobs and that sort of thing, but there is a real efficiency play that I think companies, small and large, can be leveraging today, in all that exists at the moment. So
yes, that is true. If I may say one last thing, Kamala, where our data sovereignty.
Let me just ask Kimberly to have you do that as your closing comments.
Okay.
So that we could wrap up the panel discussion. Because Kimberly, would you believe we're 2 minutes away from the end of it?
All right. So I want to just say thank you to our panelists today. Najhdla, Andrew, Dr. Sharpe, really, really interesting perspectives. I think we have a lot to think about as we go back into our respective organizations around how we see our role, be it to guide our boards, for those of us who have to do that, or to bring forward the sort of playbooks that we think can help the company to reach, fuller potential. There's a lot around, how do we use our power in the region to perhaps lobby for some of the regulations that we desire to guide, at least those in the regulated space, but perhaps generally as entities. And I think the perspectives were diverse and really deep. And Dr. Sharpe took us forward into the future, which is always great. I don't know, Kamala, if you wanted her to close off with her comment.
Yes, then Andrew and then Najhdla. So we got each.
Thanks.
Thank you so very much. As I'm sitting here, I'm thinking that we have looked at governance possibly at the institutional level and even nationally, but then I'm now thinking, where is our data stored? If we're looking at data sovereignty and access, where is our data stored, and know who owns it? Are we losing control to foreign tech providers? Because I'm not seeing national entities building our own AI infrastructure and system. So do we have the legal frameworks then to protect our national data? Do we have the legal framework to protect our personal data when we willingly give this data over to the AI? Can we trust these imported AI systems with our local data? Do we know what the outcome will be?
Thank you, everybody, for having me. To those of you who sat in on the panel, I hope you found this interesting. To me, what has helped me accept what is happening with AI is to do a combination of looking forward and looking backwards. Looking backwards, things like the development of the internet has drastically changed our world. We depend on it every single day, and if it wasn't for the internet, we wouldn't have this. Cell phones, the list goes on. Looking forward, what will we think about AI, say 5, 10, or 15 years from now? More than likely, it's going to be seamlessly integrated into our lives, as is internet, electricity, water, all the other utilities we have. And so not to be fearful of it, but figure out how you can incorporate it into your business and your everyday life, because whether you like it or not, this is what's happening. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Kamala, thank you for considering me for the panel. It was great having such stimulating discussion. I just want to say we're at a point, I would like to think of it as a checkpoint for corporate governance, where we assess the way forward. we assess our coherence in terms of our strategies, our expectations, especially our shareholder expectations, not just shareholder, stakeholder expectations, and decide how we align ourselves going forward, because fragmentation will not work in this space, and our values have to underscore everything. We continually highlight the risk, but there is such great benefit in AI and such great power. And like Peter Parker said of his Uncle Ben in the Spider-Man comic, with great power comes great responsibility. So I think now is an opportune time to pause and align ourselves, get our boards aligned, get our management teams aligned before we move into the future of AI.